30 years, 30 songs, one jaw-drop guitar break from every calendar on the wall. We start with 1960's surf twang, finish with 1989's arena squeal, and hit every big stop in between. If you love solos that make you reach for the volume knob, you're in the right place. 1960, Walk, Don't Run, The Ventures. Two Tacoma kids sped up Johnny Smith's jazz tune and cut it in a cramped Seattle studio that spring. Bob Bogle's red Jazzmaster ran into a Fender Super with the tank literally bolted to plywood. Drummer Skip Moore took $25 instead of royalties. His friends still tease him. KJR Seattle jumped on the acetate. Dalton pressed a quick 1,000, and by late August, the single sat just behind Elvis at number 2 on the Hot 100. Fender's Christmas order sheet showed Jazzmaster sales up a third, and the Ventures soon headlined Budokan without needing a singer. 1961, Hideaway, Freddie King. King's ES-345 flat-wound strings and thumb pick met Sonny Thompson's walking piano at Federal in Chicago. Willie Dixon parked the bass mic inches from the amp, so every snap landed like a whip crack. Released the first week of 1961, the instrumental ran to number 5 R&B and number 29 on pop, moving roughly 500,000 45s, an eye-opener for a straight blues cut. California surf bands stole the bent note intro, and a teenage Clapton slowed the solo to half speed on his Vox, calling it his first real guitar lesson. 1962, Miserlou, Dick Dale and his Deltones. Dale wanted his Strat to mimic his uncle's oud at drag race tempo. Fender built a prototype Showman. Dale dimed it, shredding heavy-gauge strings until his thumbnail bled. Rendezvous captured the take in Capitol's big ballroom. Room mics feeding the console so hot, engineer Stan Ross rode the fader like a rodeo bronc. West Coast DJs picked it up. Capitol shipped 100,000 copies west of the Rockies, and surf kids learned trem picking before they learned bar chords. Pulp Fiction later blasted the track worldwide, giving the lick a second summer. 1963, Pipeline, The Shantays. High schoolers Bob Spickard and Brian Carmen wrote it after a Newport surf flick demoed on a Silvertone that bled news static. At PAL Studios, producer Herb Albert kept Carmen's accidental bass slide. It sounded like a wave breaking. Dot released the single that January. By early May, it was number 4 nationwide. A spot-on American bandstand pushed D'Armond reverb tanks into East Coast garages, and every beginner band bassist tried to copy that droning low note. 1964, You Really Got Me, The Kinks. Oh, no! Ray Davies pounded a 2-chord vamp on the family piano. Brother Dave slashed a cheap Alpico speaker, chained it to a Vox AC30, and invented mainstream fuzz. Cut at Pi in July, the single shot to number 1 UK by September. Reprise's US promo budget was pocket change, but Los Angeles and New York airplay still drove it to number 7 on the Hot 100. West Coast shops even sold pre-slashed amp cones. 14 years later, Eddie Van Halen reused the crunch for his own debut, backyard speaker surgery that kept echoing. 1965, Like a Rolling Stone, Bob Dylan. Mid-June 1965, Studio A in New York buzzed with Dylan fresh off the UK tour. Al Kooper drifted from guitar to Hammond. Dylan liked the wobble and told him to stay, leaving Mike Bloomfield to peel piercing Telecaster fills straight into a wide-open twin. Take 4, 6 uncut minutes, wound up on the acetate, Columbia rushed to WABC. The station aired it full, request lines blew up, and by late August, the single parked at number 2. Bloomfield's break became every garage band's crash course, while Fender repair benches saw a spike in fried twin reverbs that fall. 1966, Shapes of Things, The Yardbirds. Jeff Beck walked into EMI with a fresh tone bender and a taped-up 59 Tele. Producer Simon Napier Bell asked for a solo that argues with itself, so Beck leaned the guitar into a Vox AC30 until feedback turned melodic. Released in February, the single sprinted to number 3 UK. Chicago's WLS filed it under Freak Beat and pushed it to number 11 stateside. Tonebender sales jumped on the West Coast, and Pete Townsend sent Beck a cheeky note thanking him for tomorrow's volume headaches. 1967, Purple Haze, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Hendrix brought the Stairway riff to Delane Leah in January, chaining a fuzz face and Octavia into a 100-watt Marshall. 3 takes later, engineer Eddie Kramer had sparks, literally, flying off the console. Olympic Studios handled a marathon mix session that stitched in backward guitar shards. UK release in March hit number 3. American AM radio hesitated, but FM stations from San Francisco to Boston wore out the grooves all summer. Guitar Center Hollywood soon faced a wave of returns from kids who learned an Octavia pedal wasn't magic in a box. 1968, Crossroads, Cream, Live. Winterland, San Francisco, first show of the run. Felix Papalardi's remote truck captured Clapton's SG and Marshall with just 3 mics, no safety net. In 4 breathless choruses, he quoted Robert Johnson, doubled stops, and left the crowd stunned at 135 BPM. Atco issued the live cut on a promo 45 the next winter. AM radio shrugged. FM called it required study. Guitar Player readers soon voted it the year's most copied solo, and Chicago engineers still use it to check if a Fender amp is set up right. 1969, Whole Lotta Love, Led Zeppelin. Olympic Studios, basic track live in 3 takes. Page, a Les Paul, and Bonham's kit muffled by Persian rugs. For the solo, Page switched amps to a little Supro aimed down a concrete stairwell and rolled the tone knob dark. Atlantic trimmed the song to 3 minutes 10 seconds for US singles. FM jocks kept the full album cut spinning. Theremin freakout and all. By February 70, the edit sat at number 4 on Billboard, and guitar shops fielded daily calls asking how a Telecaster made that sound. Myth outran facts by a mile. 1970, Machine Gun, Band of Gypsies. Fillmore East, just past midnight on New Year's Day. Hendrix stands before 3 Marshall stacks, black strap tuned down a half step. Univibe swirling, wah parked mid-sweep. Buddy Miles counts a slow 6/8 and Jimi lets a 12-minute storm fly. Tracer bends, dive bomb screams, a battlefield on 6 strings. Capitol pressed the live album in March. Billboard filed it under R&B, yet it still hit number 5. Side A became FM DJ's built-in coffee break, long enough that one listener phoned the FCC to report gunfire. It was just the vibrato bar doing its job. 1971, Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page tracked the solo at Island Studios that April using his 59 Telecaster and a tiny Supro cranked in a stone hallway for extra slapback. 3 takes, he kept the first. Led Zeppelin 4 arrived in November with no US single, but FM spun the full 8 minutes until listeners could hum every bend. By spring 72, Guitar Center had posted a handwritten "No Stairway" warning over its demo Marshalls after one tweeter too many bit the dust. 1972, Highway Star, Deep Purple. With Montreux Casino in ashes, Deep Purple parked the Stones Mobile in a hotel hallway that December. Ritchie Blackmore's Maple Neck Strat fed a Marshall Major as he dashed off harmonic minor runs, sketched on scrap paper minutes earlier. Machine Head landed in March 72. Boston's WBCN hammered the 6-minute cut at drive time, and the Codas' tapped arpeggios later gave Eddie Van Halen a roadmap for Eruption. 1973, Freebird, Lynyrd Skynyrd. Studio One, Georgia, Alan Collins, 59 Les Paul through a Fender Quad. Gary Rosington's Slide SG answering note for note. Producer Al Cooper let the tape roll. One take, 4+ minutes of soaring outro. The album dropped in August. A single edit hit radio the next year. But fans flipped to the full 9 minutes and 8 seconds and brought Bic lighters along for the ride. Collins claimed he never played it the same way twice. Aside from the opening 3 bars, every cover band now treats as gospel. 1974, Bridge of Sighs, Robin Trower. At Air Studios London, Trower plugged a 60 Strat into Univibe and Marshall, asking engineer Jeff Emmerich for Hendrix Underwater. 5 minutes later, he had it. Slow, Univibe swells, and bending thirds that hang in mid-air. The April release cracked Billboard's top 10 on FM strength alone, and guitar shops fielded weekly requests for that whoosh pedal, prompting Univox to churn out Univibes by the crate. 1975, Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen. Brian May spent 3 weeks at Rockfield stacking red special harmonies until the 24-track tape wore thin, and engineer marked the splice, "Do Not Touch, 40th dub." His solo, cut the 31st of August, was a blistering pass through an AC-30 and Deaky booster. Freddie circled the mix sheet, "Brian's solo, very tasty." The 6-minute single hit UK shops the 31st of October. US bends that December. WNBC ran it uncut, tea break and all, and by February 76, it was number 9 on the Hot 100. Radio learned opera sections don't scare listeners if the guitar sings loud enough. 1976, Hotel California, the Eagles. Criteria Studio C, Miami. Don Felder laid a 12-string intro, then switched to a 59 Les Paul into a Tweed Deluxe. Joe Walsh answered on his SG through a Champ stuffed in a padded case. Engineer Bill Simzik let them chase each other for 6 takes. Walsh finally shouted, "Nailed it," and reached for a beer. A 6-minute, 30-second promo single shipped February 77. Stations trimmed only the drum fade and topped Billboard in May after moving 1 million copies. Bedroom Duelists spent the summer trying and failing to sync 2 cassette decks in time with that intro. 1977, Dogs, Pink Floyd. At Abbey Road in July of 76, David Gilmour parked his black Strat before a 100-watt high-watt, routed it through an EMS synth for slow auto pan, and leaned on a compressor to keep the 17-minute take breathing. The eerie harmonics halfway through? A stray brush of his index finger while nodding at Nick Mason. Animals landed January 77. Graveyard Shift DJs loved the full track, and gear nerds bought up Mesa Boogie combos after Guitar Player printed Gilmour's setup. 1978, Sultans of Swing, Dire Straits. Mark Knopfler cut the solo at Basing Street, February 78, finger-picking a 1961 red Strat straight into the desk. 1 take, no amp, just a mild squeeze from a Uri 1176. The UK single arrived in May. Warner's imported it to US radio in early 79, where it climbed to number 4 by October. Fender quietly ran extra batches of Maple Neck Strats dealers called Mark models, and players everywhere tried to copy a tone made with nothing but clean fingers and nerve. 1979, Comfortably Numb, Pink Floyd. Gilmore's first solo, White Strat, High Watt Head, Leslie Cab, went down at Britannia Row in April '79. 4 days later, he cut a second one in a concrete stairwell for extra bloom. Producer Bob Ezrin stitched the best bits from 5 passes and spread them wide across the stereo field. Columbia slid a 6-minute 22-second single to FM in November '79. It stalled at number 63 on Billboard, yet still sent Boogie Mark II orders soaring. Late afternoon radiotherapy had a way of emptying wallets. 1980, Crazy Train, Ozzy Osbourne. At Ridge Farm, West Sussex, Randy Rhoads ran his cream 74 Les Paul Custom into a Marshall 1959 head. Dallas Rangemaster taped on top. Cab double-tracked with a hint of eventide chorus. Third pass nailed the descending tritone. Ozzy shouted, "More railroad," from the control room. Jet shipped the single that November, Hot 100 Indifferent. FM locked it in rotation, and Blizzard of Oz cruised past triple platinum. Guitar Center finally hung a sign by the amps, "Harmonic squeals at your own risk." 1981, Tom Sawyer, Rush. Alex Lifeson cut the 20-second break at La Studio with his white ES355 into a high-watt DR103 SM57 close. U87 for Room Bloom. Producer Terry Brown looped Pert's Oberheim pad in Lifeson's headphones, so every phase could duck between the synth swells. Mercury mailed the single in February. It cracked Rock Tracks Top 10 and yanked Moving Pictures to platinum in 10 weeks. MTV's August launch ran the live clip hourly. Suburban Kids met 7/8 time before Homeroom did. 1982, Beat It, Michael Jackson. Quincy Jones cold-called Eddie Van Halen, who showed up at Westlake A with no guitar, borrowed a red Kramer and crushed 2 takes through a Marshall half-stack. Jones stitched the best bits, spread them wide, and kept Eddie's grin on tape. Session fee, 1 case of beer. Released Valentine's Day, '83. The single hit number 1 by April and moved 5 million. Pedal makers slapped EVH stickers on anything that hissed. 1983, Let's Dance, David Bowie. Power Station, December 1982. Stevie Ray Vaughan plugged his '59 Strat into a Vibroverb on 7. No pedals, for the Texas meets Harlem bite Nile Rodgers wanted. First take stuck. Pickup switch, click and all. EMI dropped the single in March. It topped the Hot 100 2 months later. Fender phone lines lit up with left-hand trem bar questions the morning the video hit MTV. 1984, Purple Rain, Prince. Tracked live at First Avenue, Minneapolis, August of '83. Prince's cloud guitar into a Mesa Boogie Coliseum with a Boss CE1 swirl. Audience roaring on the multitrack. Only 1 overdub at Sunset Sound. Then he left Wendy's count off and the crowd whoop intact. The 8-minute 41-second single hit radio that September. Late night DJs played it whole and still drove it to number 2. By spring '85, Violet guitar finishes were back-ordered nationwide. 1985, Money for Nothing, Dire Straits. In Air, Montserrat. February 1985. Mark Knopfler ran a '58 Les Paul into a Laney head and a Gillian Kruger combo in stereo. Then parked a Crybaby half open for the wah but not wah bite. Engineer Neil Dorfman close-mic'd with an SM57, set a U67 6 feet back, and the resulting phase smear made those pinch harmonics hover. Sting wandered in from the villa next door, pina colada in hand, and improvised the "I want my MTV" line. Knopfler shrugged and gave him co-write credit. Warner serviced the single in June. By September, it sat at number 1, while kids raided pawn shops for frozen Crybabies. looking for that microwave oven tone. 1986, Master of Puppets, Metallica. Sweet Silence, Copenhagen, Kirk Hammett's 79 Flying V into a Mesa Mark II C+. No pedals, gain pinned. Producer Flemming Rasmussen triple-tracked the lead, panned at LCR, and punched in tiny bursts, so every palm mute landed like a staple gun. The album dropped in March of '86, no single, but college metal shows aired track 2 until Nielsen's people gave up counting spins. Guitar World readers voted the closing dive solo of the year, and Mesa's waitlist for 2 C+ heads stretched 6 months. 1987, Sweet Child of Mine, Guns N' Roses. Rumbo Recorders, LA, slashes Chris Derrick Les Paul clone into a rental Marshall 1959T. Volume passed sensible. 2 takes, he kept the first. Pick scrape flub and all, because mistakes keep it human. Duff McKagan's jazz bass bled into the guitar mic, giving extra growl, which engineer Mike Klink decided to leave. Geffen released the single June of '88. By September, it topped the Hot 100, and Les Paul copies doubled in mall stores. Parents wrote letters asking why teens suddenly needed top hats. 1988, Cult of Personality, Living Color. RPM, New York. Vernon Reed's custom Hamer into a Marshall JCM 800 Plus ADA MP1 preamp for the octave fuzz. 2 improvised passes. He even slips a Coltrane Giant Steps quote into the pick slot. Producer Ed Stasium ran the solo through an Eventide H300 for the ping-pong delay. Epic's September radio push sent the track to number 13, mainstream rock, and a Grammy. Jazz majors started buying half stacks for research. 1989, Kickstart My Heart, Motley Crue. Little Mountain, Vancouver. Mick Mars, BC, Rick Warlock into Soldano Slow 100 serial number 39. Engineer Bob Rock left the control room door open, so Nikki Sixx's bass rattled the guitar mic. At bar 9, Mars dive-bombed the Floyd so hard, the low E went slack, then yanked it back in tune mid-lick. Now a staple in guitar clinics. The November single peaked at number 27 pop, but became hockey gold canon overnight. And Soldano dubbed the slow the kickstart head in every catalog by New Year's. That's our year-by-year rundown. Think we skipped a shred moment? Type it up below and we'll cue it up next time. Until then, fresh picks, loud amp, have fun!